Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ayşe Süberkaş. Kazakhstan, which has hosted Syrian peace talks between Turkey, Russia and Iran for several years, will end its role. That's according to the country's deputy foreign minister, who reportedly made the announcement on Wednesday as diplomats from the three countries met in Astana. The meeting covered normalizing ties between Turkey and Syria and recent attacks by Israel. Kazakh Deputy Foreign Minister Kanat made the surprise statement on ending the Astana process, saying its goal of helping Syria emerge from isolation in the region had been largely achieved. Syria's Bashar al-Assad has met several Arab leaders in recent months and joined the Arab League summit in Saudi Arabia in May. The Astana peace talks, launched in 2017, have seen moderate success in stabilizing Syria, including creating de-escalation zones that are being patrolled by other countries. And now to discuss the Astana talks, joining me now from Istanbul is Vehbi Baysan. He is an associate professor at Haldun University. And from Ankara, Valeria Giannotta. She is the scientific director of the Observatory on Türkiye at the Center for Studies of International Politics. A warm welcome to you both, and thanks for joining me on Straight Talk. Valeria, what has the Astana process achieved so far, and why has it been ended?
Well, it has been the 20th meeting of the Astana process, I would say, that started back in 2017. And as the final declaration stated, the main aim was stabilizing the country and just trying to contain as much as possible the bloodshed. Therefore, the minister of Kazakhstan declared that Astana will not host any further talks. And basically, also, there were some main crucial points that they were entangled, like the fight against terrorism. And all the parties clearly stated that they are pretty much committed to maintain and preserve the territorial integrity of Syria and to combat against any sort of attempt in separating the territory of Syria, and also any sort of attempt led also by third countries of aiming at supporting terrorist groups. And basically, this goes back to the situation in the north of the country. And also, another important point was the accent that was posed on the need of easing the full stabilization of the relationship between Syria and Turkey as well.
So, Vehbi, I mean, would you agree with that? Is Syria stabilized, and how about its northern parts?
Well, absolutely. That's the issue, probably one of the most difficult among the negotiations and on the table still. This is to say that in Idlib, not only hundreds, but thousands of armed men, some estimates suggest 50,000. Even half of it is a very, very serious issue to deal with, because no one knows how to deal with them. To begin with, that Syrian regime considers opposition not as an opposition, but calling them as terrorists. Number two, Idlib area, among the civilians, let's remember that hundreds and thousands of civilians now living with armed groups, and each one of them is controlling a quarter. Nobody knows what's going on there exactly. And what's going to happen to these people? They're just gonna lay their arms and then, just as if nothing happened, goes back to their villages and continue planting their tomatoes. It's not going to happen. It's a very serious issue. Astana talks, let's remember, is since January 2017, and before that, 5 years, Arab League tried to handle these negotiations. But also there is, Ayşe, if you allow me, there's extremely important issue on these negotiations is Turkey's stand in northern Syria. Let's remember that in the pretext of fight against ISIS, US armed, financed, and trained thousands of people, and perception of threat for Turkey, for their national security, comes from there, because Turkey wants assurances what's going to happen to these armed men after ISIS evaporates and disappears. We know in the past they were just left abandoned in the region, and those guns turned against each other and against the civilians living in the region. If you noticed, I did not mention any ethnic background. It doesn't really matter who they are. I always repeat, even if they're Eskimos, they are very, very dangerous if
Yes.
you have those kind of weapons in the region.
So, Valeria, Kazakh Deputy Foreign Minister said that the Astana process has ended and it has achieved its goal. Is there a confusion over the fate of this process, since the Russian negotiator Lavrentiev said the process isn't over, but will possibly be moved to a different location? What's your take on that, and what's next?
Well, definitely the process cannot be considered accomplished because there are many stakeholders involved on the conflict nowadays. Russia, US as well, there are the Iran, there is Turkey too, beside the Assad regime. Of course, in the case of Russia, there is a peculiarity because Russia nowadays is pretty much involved and occupied in fighting in the Black Sea against Ukrainians. So it seems that Syria is not going to be the first priority for their concern and for their security. And already Russia has taken two very important military bases, one in Latakia and the other one in Tarsus. And in this way, it opened the way to the Eastern Mediterranean, putting a sort of flags in the region as well.
So, go on, please.
Yes, I would say that there are some other actors. I mean, US is still backing, as the colleague before said, the Kurdish groups as well, that they are threatening also the interest of Turkey and creating a sort of spillover effect within the territory of Turkey too. There are the groups backed by Iran. They are sort of controlled. They're part of the country, and also more recently, the Observatory of Syrian human rights has recorded a sort of escalation of violence, and also a sort of tensions between the U.S. and Russia too. So, I would say that the situation is pretty much complicated.
So we see Assad wants Turkish troops to withdraw from the region, but does he also want the same for the country's northeast, Vehbi?
Well, of course not. They want full control in the region. In fact, if you want to establish stability in Syria, that's absolutely necessary. But they don't give answers, if you notice, into any of these questions, because they refuse to sit around the table with which they call terrorists. So long as you don't acknowledge and recognize this is Syrian opposition but not terrorists, then there will be no productive result to go to normalization of Syria. They just insist on Turkish soldiers actually should be withdrawn from northern Syria, but they are not their occupiers. They're helping the local communities, they're building houses, and also making sure that the safety and security of civilians are assured. So, I mean, you can see that they're diverting somehow the negotiations to another direction, but they're not producing answers for a good solution. And of course, Syria is not alone on that. US also not producing solutions. Yes. What's going to happen to these armed groups there?
So, Valeria, do you see a suitable environments for talks between Ankara and Damascus to resume?
Well, actually, what happened in the most recent time is giving some positive signs for a genuine talks between Ankara and Damascus. I mean, we shouldn't forget that back in April, there were the talks among the Minister of Defense, and then last May, just after the Turkish elections, the talks among the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So there is a sort of open gate for a roadmap. In that the final goal is the full normalization of relationship between Ankara and Damascus. But as we said before, there are still hot topics to be solved and to be entangled. First of all is the withdrawal of Turkish troops, as Damascus says, but also the integrity and the fight against the groups that Ankara recognizes as a terrorist, the YPG. And this implies as well the role of US, because US is backing those groups. So I think that the full normalization of Syria anyway goes across the genuine talk between Ankara and Washington too.
So Vehbi, what's next, do you think, for Syria, since both the European Union and US are against the rehabilitation of the Assad regime? Could Assad soon be back among the international community?
Well, it looks like, because in the last Arab League meeting, you can see that he was well received by the regional countries and powers there. And of course, international community, it seems, if the regime survived, sooner or later will receive him as well. But it's here, Astana talks are so far is good. At least they are not fighting, and it's in the political arena, and including the delegations representing UN Special Envoy Geir Pedersen there, and the Syrian regime represented. It is so far inconclusive. We have to accept that. But having negotiations shifted from Astana elsewhere is not going to stop the negotiations, and should not stop. It's my wishful thinking, maybe, because otherwise there is no. I mean, enough people already died, more than 500,000 people, and as you know, that 10 to 15 million people displaced. So negotiations hopefully will continue. Perhaps Arab League would take and help the situation. But how are they going to help these armed groups, both for Turkey's threat perception as well as the ones in Idlib, is still on the table. They have to find a solution for this.
All right, Vehbi and Valeria, unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.